Hello, everyone. Panelists, it's so good to have all of you here. And we're here to have a conversation to unpack our social compact. My name is Dawn Yip. I work in the Ministry of Culture, Community and Youth, and I'm with the Forward Singapore Secretariat.
I'm Eva. I'm a mum of 4 boys, and I'm a public officer and a volunteer with the Forward SG team. Yeah.
Hi, my name is Siang, and I was also a facilitator for the Forward Singapore Conversations, and I work in an agency that helps Singapore be the best place to age in.
Hi, my name is Ruiming. I run a blog called The Woke Salaryman. I'm also an NYC Council member.
Hello, everybody. My name is Stefanie, Yuen, Thio. I'm the Joint Managing Partner at TSMP Law Corporation. And last year, I founded SG Her Empowerment, which we call SHE for short. It's an NGO for empowering women and girls in Singapore.
Thanks, all of you. So just as a way to kickstart the conversation, I'm going to ask you a series of questions on a scale of 1 to 5. To what extent you agree with the questions? 1 is disagree, 5 is agree. And on the count of 3, I'll ask you all to turn around your numbers towards the camera. Is that all right? Okay. I am confident that going forward, Singaporeans will focus less about I, me, and mine, and more about we, us, and ours. 1 to 5, what's your response? Okay, 1, 2, 3. Turn your boards around. Okay, wow, 2.5, 3. Wonderful, thanks. Okay, and I really want to explore your responses later on.
Clearly, you have a lot to do.
I have a lot of work to do. We have a lot of work to do in Singapore. Next question. I believe that the onus is on the government to solve Singapore society's challenges. Okay, if you're ready. 1, 2, 3. Okay, well, that's a pretty good answer. So on the low side, 1.5 to 2.5, very good. And the next question, perhaps unsurprisingly, I believe that the onus is on civil society and citizens to solve Singapore society's challenges. So it's the flip side of that question. Ready? On the count of 3. 1, 2, 3. Okay, so slightly higher, 1.5 to 3. So I guess it's a mix of both then, huh? Final question. Erase the board. Yeah, I'm not giving you much time to think, am I? Last question. I believe that deep partnership between citizens and the government is possible. Do you agree? 1, 2, 3. Flip it around. Okay. 4.99. Okay, so it's a whole range from 2 to 4.99. We've got a good discussion ahead of us. Thank you all for doing that. Okay, so we're going to start exploring some questions. And all of you are involved in some way or another to make Singapore a better place and to bring about positive change in Singapore. I'm curious, what is it that motivates you? So maybe we'll start with Stefanie, if that's all right.
I feel I've been very privileged in Singapore. We grew up in a country where there's a lot of equality, much more so than a lot of other countries with more entrenched patriarchal systems, for example. And I think that when you have been given opportunities to do well, you have an obligation to give back. My way of giving back has sort of changed and morphed over the years, but I kind of feel that it's just a necessity. Whether it is to help one person in the course of your day or to help more people, I do feel it.
If it's okay, I'm going to sort of bring the question to Eva. What are your thoughts on this?
From very young, I was exposed to some volunteering opportunities through school. And I think it's just become part of the person that I am, the kind of life that I live, that, you know, whenever there's an opportunity to help, like you step up. So it's not like I'm somebody who goes out and looks for opportunities. Sometimes those come and all I just need to say, yes, I can spare this weekend or I can spend these few hours doing that.
Thank you. And as someone, I guess, who's been involved in Forward Singapore and asking you for help as well to be a volunteer facilitator, I really appreciate it when you've stepped in to help as well. And I think you've been such a wonderful facilitator.
Thank you.
Siang, what about you? What is it that drives you when it comes to bringing about social good?
I believe that we are responsible for the environment in which we operate, so it's our job to try to make it better for ourselves selfishly as well. And I think, again, for me, helping others actually bring joy, right, to myself. So I think for me, it's quite a selfish reason.
Ruiming, over to you. So your story in this is a little bit different. You co-founded a wonderful website and social media platform called Woke Salaryman. What is it that keeps you going in that, in creating this content that helps to educate and raise awareness on financial and life issues?
Actually, pretty similar to what Sanjay said. I think, like, number one, I think it's fun, right, to, you know, share your opinion on various matters. But I think it's very important for more young Singaporeans to be more aware of, like, the nuances between the issues. Because sometimes when you see on social media, everything's very black and white. So we felt that, you know, by creating a page that could kind of allow people to share, to see both perspectives or like multiple perspectives, it would do a lot for society. And of course, like, selfishly, the better society is in Singapore, like the more I benefit and the more other people benefit.
And I think what we're seeing in society now is quite a lot of polarization and sometimes acrimony. So I really marvel at the fact that you've managed to bring together, at least on Facebook, almost 500,000 followers. So you've managed to bring that balance.
I think it's very hard to find harmony nowadays because social media creates this thing called like confirmation bias. So nowadays people think in like silos. So you have all these like different factions on social media, but society itself is not united in a way that it used to be. Because like I think the common interest that used to exist in the era before social media, I think that has been eroded away by the way we communicate, the way we think. And so yeah, I think we try to be a page that allows people to, see like, some people say like both the extreme left and the extreme right.
Yeah.
And we try to kind of like bring people in the middle because I think that's where most change happens.
And you do it also with a lovely dose of humor that I appreciate very much.
We try to. I think sometimes we succeed. So thank you.
Often, I would say.
Often.
I was curious to know, what is your understanding of a social compact? So if it's okay, I'll start with Steph this time.
Social compact, I think it's really the understanding in society as to what each person's roles and responsibilities are. The problem, I think, in Singapore is that the earlier understanding of social compact is you vote for a certain party, they make sure that you have an iron rice bowl, you have a roof over your head. That social compact doesn't work in today's age. I think a lot more people want autonomy. They want to be able to craft their own destiny. What people want is very different now from when I was growing up. So I think it's important to relook at the social compact and what it is. But basically what it really is that we have to understand what each person's roles and responsibilities are. And that's not just individuals. It's where does civil society sit in all this? Where do the voluntary organizations? What is government's role? Is government different from the politician's role? So I think that all that needs to be unpacked and explored. And it's great that you're doing this.
Thanks, Stefanie. When we said, whose role is it to foster this understanding of what society is about? Based on your answers, my sense is you all had this sort of sense that different parts of society have their role to play. It's not just the government's role, it's not just citizens and civil society. Eva, your thoughts on this?
So when I think about social compact, the thing that, the example that I think helped me understand it was the concept of the many helping hands in the social sector, right? Like a very clear idea that actually, one party cannot uplift entire society. We do need to work together, and there should be many parties involved because the problems are complex, the problems are intractable. The belief that I have is that we need to like co-own the challenges that face us and like work together to address them.
I'm going to cut over to Siang because you talked about working in an agency that deals squarely with aging well in Singapore. How do you see this social compact playing out in the space of aging?
So first, I'd say my sort of understanding of social compact is the society that we want our young to grow up in and for us to age in. And I say this because I'm just past middle age, right? So that's where I am, sort of biological age-wise. The belief each should play an equal role, although I think we need certain shifts in order for that to happen.
I think the main person who needs to take responsibility is the individual. And we haven't considered that. We said civil society on the one hand, government on the other. But increasingly, if we want more rights, the individual needs to take responsibility and ownership. So,
Fair enough.
And maybe just to bring in a third player here, which is actually corporates or business owners. I mean, we haven't explicitly mentioned it. Since you both own businesses, what do you think is the role of employers and business owners in the social compact?
Yeah, I would say like same as the individual. I mean, ultimately, the businesses that thrive are the one that the consumer supports. I feel like they kind of play like an equal role. So maybe like an individual business has more power than the individual. But when all the consumers gather together, they have a lot of say over what businesses do and how they behave.
I really feel that the individual needs to carry the bulk of the responsibility. I think they really need to own it. Everybody else then has to play their role. I agree with you that businesses have to play a role, just like government does, just like civil society. I believe businesses can do a lot because ultimately where the money is, that's where the needle moves. So I agree with that. But I wouldn't say that anybody has more responsibility for what happens in their world and their community than the individual, because you've got control over your own actions.
Yeah. And I have to say, in your case, Steph, it's really intriguing because you're an individual who also went on to then form an institution, so to speak, SHE, which is an NGO that supports women. So that's wonderful. So we've talked about the role of individuals and citizens. How have you seen that evolve over time in Singapore? I'm going to start with Siang.
I think there's a lot more desire, and I also think there's a lot more capacity, right, for individuals and groups of individuals to do more. For me, the most important thing is to harness that energy. I think the energy can sometimes go in the wrong way. The only way forward is for us to trust in some of the wisdom of groups of people and their energies to make things better. So perhaps from my perspective, the public service can sometimes be a little bit too cautious, and maybe it's okay for us to experiment a little bit more and tap on these energies.
If I can just ask you to elaborate a bit, are you saying that maybe the public service steps in too quickly? There's space for us to pull back to give citizens space to do more? Is that what you're saying?
I mean, what has served our public service well has been predictability, being able to consistently deliver sort of the same results, right? And that's something that we should be quite proud about. But I think in the next phase, even as I work with seniors, right, we realize that you can tell the senior whatever you want to say to them, but if they're not practicing it at home, then you don't see the improvement.
Yeah.
So it's really about figuring out how you work with them on their energies and motivation, rather than sort of prescribing to them that this is the best practice guidelines that you should follow. If we want people to sort of take charge of their own issues, find their own solutions, then in a way we've got to be ready for the solutions that they find.
Okay.
And perhaps this is something that we need to practice a bit more in a public service, that it may not always be neat, it might not always be the solution that you envisioned as the optimum solution, but it may be better in the longer term because the energies are harnessed from the people.
Okay, so maybe ownership over neatness and predictability, perhaps. I feel like I need to cut over to Eva. So what are your thoughts on this? How has the citizens' role evolved? How do you see it evolving?
I mean, when I think about it, when I was much younger, the voice of the citizen was always heard either in coffee shops where people just congregate to talk, or in the taxis where they talk. They write letters to the forum pages in Straits Times. So if you're very active, you might sign up to be part of the feedback unit before, which is now Reach, right? But I think today there's many more avenues for people to have their views heard and to find community, and of course, there's some dangers in that. There's an echo chamber effect, etc. But also there's opportunities in finding like-minded people and finding people who care about the things you do. And I also find that social media has been helpful in encouraging people to continue. If I go around passing around masks during COVID-19, it gets captured and then people thank you for the work. I think it has an encouraging effect. So I think I'm an optimist in this sense that I think people care about Singapore, people care about the world and what's happening with the world. And I think we have a government that is also cares to involve citizens and actually inviting citizens to work together. Of course, there's always room for improvement in the ways we do this. I think we're learning as a government to do that. But I think that is where my hope is that actually it's possible. I choose to be optimistic about it too. Because of the work that we do in 4SG, it's like if you don't believe that it's possible, you're like, why do it?
And I draw a link between what you've just said with what Stefanie said, which is it comes back to the individual and your own mindset. If you are optimistic, if you're positive about it, you bring that attitude into the world and you can actually then effect change.
Yeah.
So Steph, having quoted you, I'd love to hear your thoughts on how you see the citizens' role changing over time.
I'm a little less optimistic, I must say, but I would love to be proven wrong. I think citizens are less pliant, so for that I'm optimistic. I think we're less likely to take things without questioning, and I think that is something to be encouraged. I do feel that the citizen is stepping up a bit more. My concern with social media, and this is where a bit of the pessimism comes in, is the social media magnifies the polarization effect, right? And so those of us in this echo chamber are going to be very, very removed from the views of those in that echo chamber. And that's when, if you're not having proper conversations and not having proper engagement, then the individual doesn't play a good role, and all they're doing is saying, we support this idea. And I think that that's not great. So I think we're going to need to put a lot of work into making sure that people are heard and that they are also listening, whether it is to the government, whether it's to an NGO, or whatever it may be.
Thank you. And that's really a deep conviction that those of us who are working on the Forward Singapore exercise share, which is the need to bring Singaporeans of all stripes and shades together in a space so we can have those hard conversations. We may not fully agree on everything, but we really want to be able to broker a broad consensus where we can on the direction Singapore needs to go in. Ruiming, what would you add to all this? How is the citizens' role changing from your lens?
Oh yeah, so I think like back when Singapore first started, it was more like top-down approach, right? Like the minister say what, then you just do what, you just follow. The minister say do this, join this industry, you just go this industry. I think over time, the government became more consultative, and of course, and that as a result, the citizens have also been more vocal. I think there's a difference between, however, being vocal and like taking action. Right? I think there are a lot of people who just want to say they want this thing to happen, but then they don't actually want to do it.
Yeah.
Sometimes it's only like a say-only sort of exercise. But I mean, if I were to critique something about like the Singapore government has done, is that people who are still under the first government, the first gen government, they are still alive today. So it takes a really long time for people to change their behavior. Because if you think about it, democracy is something that takes time to nurture and foster. And Singapore is only like a very young nation.
Yes.
Maybe the democracy in Europe, they took like 100 years to get to where they are today. Some segments of Singapore population may not be ready to just, be more vocal and take action in society.
So I think that's one of the intriguing things about Singapore society, especially because we're aging. We do have a multi-generational population now. And I think some of the schisms we see fall along demographic lines, right? Old versus young, having very different points of view on any number of issues. I wanted to come back to Steph's point about facilitating conversations between Singaporeans. Siang and Eva, both of you were involved as facilitators for our Forward Singapore conversation. I'd love to hear what your experience of that was like. What do you think of how we've been engaging?
So I told you that I wanted to volunteer because, I'm in my own echo chamber, right, of my friends, my colleagues that I work with. And I wanted to sort of go to a totally different arena and interact with people that I don't usually mix with. I would say that the variety and the diversity was quite interesting. The energy was what, I thought was very, very heartwarming, that people were willing to sort of, never mind if I'm not the expert, I'll just tell you what I think, and then maybe somebody can help frame it, right? And there were sort of people helping each other sort of strengthen their points. So I thought that was a good start, right? But I think as Ruiming says, that's the start. And then really it's about whether people say, will I do better if I sort of start my own, get my group of friends to come together and solve some of the issues that we're talking about, and then represent ourselves more clearly and advocate for our own sort of positions to the authorities, right? In a way where you can then have a dialogue and conversation. I thought it's a great start, but I think it needs to continue.
I mean, for me, I love it. I love it, one, because I get to escape from my four boys on the weekend for a few hours, do something different. One of the things that motivates me is just creating a space where people from different walks of life can just talk to each other and hopefully listen. And that's one of the things that I keep saying, right? When I facilitate, like, be curious to hear other perspectives, why there's different stories and why people think a certain way. And I don't think that today we have those conversations around the issues that matter with us as spontaneously as we'd like or as regularly. And so I love I think creating that space. And I feel like if I see that conversation, I feel quite happy. So I just facilitated this weekend, and one of the participants came up to me and asked, how is that representative of Singapore? It's such a small percentage of Singaporeans and their views. And I was explaining to him, like, better than no views or just one minister or one public officer's view, right? From behind the scenes, I know that the team's working really hard to try and make sure at least all the different voices are represented. You know, a lot of citizens come and they want to interact with the grassroots advisors or the political office holders, but actually they miss out the fact that there's so many public sector officers who are involved, facilitating, and they're listening.
Yep.
So you know, in the same way that we are actually hearing the views, and in some way, it is going to shape the way these officers interact with the policies, the services, the operations that they're working on. And so I think that's where the richness is. And I think that's the part that sometimes participants don't see, right?
I love the point you make that these engagements, as we facilitate, they transform us as well. Because we're holding the multiplicity of views and we're also just our lenses are widening, right, as we pick up all the different points of view. When Parliament reopened in April, there were a number of speeches, one in particular by DPM Lawrence Wong, where he articulated a bunch of shifts that we want to make in society, shifts in skills, in success, in social support, how we care for seniors, and how we see our sense of collective responsibility. So I'd love to hear from you what you thought of these shifts that were articulated, because that really is some of the broad directional changes that we hope to see coming out of Forward Singapore. If it's okay, I'm going to start with you, Ruiming.
In principle, you know, like, a lot of things they sound wonderful, but I think I'm just not sure whether is it like practically possible. Like, for example, when DPM Lawrence, when he says stuff like, you know, the consumer must be willing to pay more, I think that is very true as we established earlier, but I'm just not sure whether that will actually happen
doable.
or whether or not Singaporeans are okay with the trade-offs. So for example, when let's talk about hawker food. Everybody on paper says that, oh, we want hawker culture to thrive. But then when it comes to paying extra more for the food, you know, people are, I don't want. I think I'll go KFC or, you know, Carl's Jr. or something like that.
Yeah. So I think the word you use I really like is trade-offs, that if we do want some of these changes to happen, say hawker food to continue, then all of us are going to have to be prepared to bear with some of the consequences of that, which might be, for instance, higher prices.
I wanted to add that, like, I think everybody needs to walk the talk. And I'm a mom, so I have 2 boys doing PSLE this year, and then 2 boys that are headed for special education, P1 next year. And so the shift towards multiple pathways of success really resonates with me. But it's like really tough as a PSLE mom to try and control the urge to throw a million tuition, interventions to my children. And repeat to myself, like, so I'm always repeating to myself, like, multiple pathways of success. I believe in that, that PSLE is going to be the means by which my child finds a secondary school that suits them rather than, you know, the make or break kind of thing. And so even if government policy changes, but if, like, the individual cannot change or the community cannot change our mental models and mindsets around it, we're never going to, like, move forward. So I feel like everybody needs to walk the talk.
Yeah. And it's not going to be an overnight thing.
It is not going to be an overnight thing.
I remember seeing some news articles recently about how government has sort of reduced stress through removing mid-year exams, and then some parents go ahead to impose other kinds of tuition on their kids to make up for this lack of a checkpoint.
That's right.
So really the change needs to be all around.
Can I say something on this?
Yes, please.
I think instead of talking about how we need to change the definition of success or what we value as skill sets, all of which is necessary, Singapore should be saying, what's my vision of my country, my society, and my community moving forward? Do I like that vision? Do I buy into it? And then do I want that? And if I want that, these are the downstream things that have to happen. This is the vision of the Singapore that we want for ourselves. What would that be for me? One, I want it to be a place where we engage as a community respectfully with each other, where I may think your perspective is stupid, but I will defend your right to say it, so long as it's not harmful to somebody else. Two, it is a vision where there's inclusivity, where everybody's skill sets, whether it is children with learning, and we say disabilities, but all we really mean is people who are used to excelling by studying in a certain way. But other people can do it. So I think what's really important is that we have a place where every Singaporean is valued as a person. And we look at how to make the most of their particular assets, their skill sets. Now that's going to involve looking after some of the weaker, the more vulnerable, the aged. We need to be thinking about that. That's where Siang's work comes in. But then when we have something that we believe in, then we work towards it. And then people can tinker and say, if we're going to do this, then we need to redefine what is success, we redefine meritocracy.
I like what Steph said, right? I think what she said was, I thought resonated with me was, it's a Singapore where everybody is the best version of themselves, or can be the best versions of themselves. So I was also thinking through that. I think my organization does quite a lot of work, some of which is, I think, pretty good. But one time that I was really proud of my organization was that we had a cleaning uncle, right? Or, who was, and I happened to be having breakfast, waiting for the next meeting, and then we just had a chat, and he said, I like working here. He was actually contracted by the cleaning company. He said, I like working here. And I said, why? And he said, because here, people wish me good morning, and they call me uncle. And I was like, actually, that was really nice, because I thought that in Singapore, if that's the sort of forward Singapore vision, it's really a place where people help other people belong and feel that they have value in this place, right? And even small things I felt could mean quite a lot, right? And I think that's where you said it starts from what individual actions we can take.
Thank you. Does anyone want to respond to what each other has said so far?
I think maybe like the challenging thing about achieving like a common goal, as I said, is like society has become just so fragmented. Like, for example, some groups of society do not want LGBT rights. Some of them want LGBT rights. And they do not want to compromise at all. And I think like both are viewed independently. They're all like valid values to have, but like when they have to live together and nobody wants to compromise, then it gets really, really challenging.
So is what you're saying then that as Singapore becomes more diverse, the ability to have to live in a space where we can honor each other's differences and co-create a shared space together while holding on to our values. It sounds impossible, but yet this is really what we're after.
Yeah, I think like qualities like empathy, like compassion for one another, being able to compromise become like so much more important. And I'm not sure whether like society is ready to do that. Because nowadays online, you see someone, you're like, oh, the person is wrong. But it's actually more like, okay, that person has a different perspective.
I'm going to ask a different question here, which is how might we reach this position of being able to respect another person's point of view, which might be different from ours? I mean, you alluded to that, Steph, just now.
You start with a set of common values, right? Is it a theocracy? If it's not, then one religion shouldn't have the right to tell people what to do. And then, what are our values and how do we do that? And then the most important part is to have a conversation. If you talk to these people who are very polarized, I always ask them, do you have a friend who's on the other side of the spectrum? What do you think of his point of view? Because when you're engaging with people and you recognize that they have a right to exist and they have value in your life and society, it becomes very different engaging with that idea than when it's just some joker whom you've never met before. So I think that that's really important. I've asked people this, people who are against LGBTQ, I'm like, do you have a close LGBTQ friend? And if they say no, then I'm like, how then do you know what you're even dealing with? What are the struggles? How do you tell me what the situation is if you've got no, even secondhand knowledge of that? So that's the conversation I have.
Understand. I think because when we can retreat to our online community so easily, we don't bother to go and meet like people physically and have in-person conversations. I mean, that's why there's this joke like, the kampong spirit has died because, it became a spirit. So you don't really talk to your neighbors, right? You want to rent, you just talk to your your little silo.
Online community,
At a recent Forward Singapore conversation, one of the ideas that came up was to just say good morning to your neighbor in the lift. And we just asked people, whoever came up with the idea, asked people just to put their names down if they're prepared to do that. And so many people just wrote their name at the bottom of that because it's such a small and yet easy thing to do. And we don't do it because it's awkward, it's strange.
I always talk to my neighbors. I talk to the little boys. 小孩子你几岁? Ask them how old they are. They all stare at me like, is she gonna kidnap me or something?
I think when we were talking about the issue, I was thinking about the tudong issue and tudong engagement that happened many years ago, and recently, now nurses in hospitals can wear a head covering. I mean, and I was part of that engagement as a part of the community. And I think the thing that stood out for me was one, that we were taking turns to listen to each other, both the policymakers and also the community, and the religious leaders were involved. And I felt like I was like heard. So I think in the protracted conversations that we have around complex issues where there's diverse opinions, I think we just need to learn first to talk to each other, listen, and also have a bit of patience.
Yes.
You might not win today or get what you want today, but it doesn't mean that the battle is lost or that people don't share in like your beliefs.
I wanted to pick up a point that Ruiming brought up on kampong spirit. And I thought, ironically, during COVID, I thought there was a lot more of that coming together, right? And I was trying to think through why. And I think that was the time where we all felt very vulnerable. There were no clear answers. The government didn't have the answer that we have to follow. And then people started saying, you know, we should help ourselves as much as we can, right? And that was also a time that my neighbor and me gave each other incessant food.
Yes, I was baking and making desserts like nobody's business.
I live alone, so he's very cute. He's this very old uncle. And then he said, you know, one person cooked very difficult. So when he bought lunch for his family, he'll bring an
that's so
extra
sweet.
set. That was very sweet, right? And then whatever I gave him back, he would give me like 5 times more. Then I'm like, ugh. I don't know whether I should stop or not, right? But and I think maybe moving forward, we kind of need to be a little bit more
Community spirited.
open to saying that, you know, there are some things that we don't have very clear answers about.
Yeah.
And actually helping one another could, or just knowing one another, right, could be a better way forward.
I think it's worth saying like this phenomena is not just Singaporean, right? I think like a lot of people in major cities around the world feel lonely, disengaged. I hosted like someone who cycled from, I think like he's a French guy, cycled through Southeast Asia at my place, and he was telling me that within Paris, he also feels like there's no sense of belonging because nowadays people are very fragmented. So it's not just a Singaporean thing.
Okay, I'm going to get to the last set of questions, which is around how we sort of see Singapore moving forward from here. So the next question I have for you is, what do you think we can do to better inspire more active citizenry? Let me start with Steph. Too bad. Pasang.
How to inspire more active citizenry? I'm going to say something very un-PC, which you're probably going to edit out. But
Try us.
I think it's important for the government to make people feel that they are heard. And I think that that's the biggest thing. You wanna have conversations, you better be listening. You wanna listen, you better be taking action if warranted. And I think that that's the big challenge. It's tough.
And I think even when let's say the government doesn't take up a suggestion because it's not feasible. I mean, some citizens have full of ideas, right? A lot of them are not feasible. They should communicate it like very, very clearly. I think one good example would be maybe like the Dover Forest incident. Like the government did listen to the Nature Society's concerns to some degree. So I think the government was like, look, you know, we do have like a housing issue. We can't just leave the forest there. We gotta build something, but we'll try to integrate some stuff. I think not perfectly, you know. I mean, I'm like a nature nerd myself, so obviously it wasn't done like 100%. Obviously the ecosystem has changed a little bit, but from the incident, people can see like the government takes feedback into consideration. And then you just repeat this over time, being consistent. And I think it will build trust with the people.
Thanks. Yeah, I do agree. The Dover Forest was a really good example of how the government, citizens reacted to something, and the government really took the effort to pay attention and see what it could do to change the outcome somewhat. Siang, what would you have to add to this?
So I think to your question about maybe what does a government that listens look like, I thought it's okay sometimes to say we don't quite know the answer, but some things require trade-offs, right? And the government has a view of the trade-off, but other people have different views. And I think sometimes it's okay to say we don't necessarily have the right answers.
I completely agree, and I think sometimes there's such an aversion to admitting any form of weakness or vulnerability, that you have to put the ultimate policy that's been decided upon as if it is ironclad. I think it's important to sort of say, and the government did a fantastic job out of COVID. Okay, because this is the best we know for now,
Yeah.
and we're going to keep changing as we need to do it. But this is the best we know for now. Let me explain to you why we're making some of these decisions, so that you can buy in. Like, sure, you don't have all the answers. Nobody has all the answers.
Yeah, I think most reasonable people will get it, and then the unreasonable people, you just ignore.
You're just being, yeah, correct. You're being unreasonable. Uncle, it cannot be helped. Inflation is like this.
Yeah.
The bank got to charge you more interest on your mortgage. It's like that one.
One thing like I miss about LKY is that he would just say the matter, and then people would draw their own conclusion. And then I guess if we are striving towards being a democracy, if people don't agree, then you vote out. You know what I mean? You can use your vote in the end to make a difference. I think like we need to accept that no one knows everything, no one will be in power forever, and I think that's how I think Singapore will thrive moving forward.
Yeah.
And I guess on the flip side, you know, if the political office holders or the public service says we don't know everything, but this is what we think is best for now, we might change it along the way. On the flip side, I think then is when they do change it, then I hope that there's also balanced voices, not to say, you know, you turn
again.
Yes,
you know,
exactly.
you make mistakes, we pay
Yes.
you top salary and this is what
Yes.
happens. So I think it's a little bit of both, right? If we want this to move ahead, then both sides need to give the other side a bit of confidence.
I mean,
right,
I
that
have
this
to
is the
say,
way to
Sandra,
move.
that while I have been on this interview very open about my criticisms, I do actually feel that when I've met with civil servants and worked with them, I actually do feel that, like you, they're all patriotic, they are public spirited, and they take a lot of poop, was your word? Was that right?
Yeah, hope is the right word.
I mean, they take a lot of stress in their jobs. So this is not to take anything away from them. I think it's really more the playbook approach needs to change because we need a new approach for the new Singapore.
Something that we got reminded recently about was also in whatever we design for seniors, then we get asked, how much of the senior voice is in here?
Yes.
And it's designed by all these sort of younger people, bureaucrats, if you like, right, or technocrats who calibrate it perfectly fine. But is that what the seniors want? And if you want seniors to be empowered, then I'm sorry, you've got to ask them what they want, so that whatever you do, then they will take it and then go further with it. So I think we're learning as well to do this differently and to be ready to accept that we don't know it all.
I wanted to say that the conversation was making me feel really uncomfortable. And not because I disagree with anything, but I think because there was a lot of hard truths in a lot of what you said.
Yeah.
And when I think about myself being in the public sector and my public sector colleagues, you know, to have grown up in a public service where, on hindsight, we always did the right thing, did it well, made the right decisions. I think it's difficult for us to approach a problem and say, actually, we don't know.
Yep.
It almost feels like we are letting down, you know, the legacy that we bring along, our predecessors who trained us. And so I think the discomfort is this embracing this challenge that we face going forward and needing to learn how to do things differently. I think that I agree, and I just don't think it's like this so easy also.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
I think in the past it made sense for the government to make a lot of decisions.
Yeah.
Like 1960 Singapore, not everyone educated, not a lot of people like went uni, went tertiary education, right?
And if that's the world that Singaporeans want, then that's their trade-off that they're going to have to make. And it's a fair enough one. It's completely reasonable. And during COVID, everybody accepted. Nobody has all the answers. You're doing the best you can. Clearly, you all are working really hard. Thank you very much. We appreciate it. And I would like that same spirit of collaboration. If you had to come up with a social compact, I think that wouldn't be a bad model to start with.
Thank you. Two thoughts come to mind. One is this saying that what got you here won't get you there. And I think that's exactly where Singapore is, right? What's got us through the first 60 years is not what will take us into the future. And therefore, on this point of discomfort, all of us are going to have to go through some discomfort because we're learning new ways of being with each other. And I think the other phrase that comes to mind then is we need to lean into the discomfort, not lean out of it and retreat into echo chambers, but lean into engaging with people and points of view that may differ from our own. During COVID, I think it really inspired a lot of citizen activity because there's just so much to be done. And I remember I just felt so profoundly moved when I stepped into a lift and I saw that someone, complete stranger, I don't know who it is, it was not labeled, had just put hand sanitizer in the lift. And this was during a season where Singapore was short of hand sanitizer and someone had put their bottle in the lift and just say, help yourself. Well, without any marker of ownership or identity. And I just thought, okay,
And
if
it stayed
this
there.
is, well, as far as I could tell, it stayed there.
Maybe the next guy came and took it home.
I know, right? But it gave me such hope. It was just a small
Yeah.
thing, but it gave me such hope that there's this generosity of spirit.
Yes.
I think in some ways Singapore is still facing like multiple crises. It's just that nothing as urgent as COVID. I mean, we have like a growing population, eroding tax base. The world is becoming becoming more inward. Less countries are willing to trade. So all these are all like crises in itself, and we will need to be united. It's just
And
that.
that's before we talk about AI.
Yeah, exactly.
And climate change.
Yes.
Yeah, and like just that this happened over a long period of time, so people don't really feel the urgency to be united as well. Although it's very important that we are united to kind of, if we want to overcome it together.
Having said that, on activism, honestly, I think people are just looking for causes. When I set up SHE, people would be like, what are you doing? And I would tell them, just in passing, and they're like, totally, I for it. And this is men and women. Can I help? What can we do? What can my company do? So I think people are just looking for causes. During COVID, I heard a story on social media. We were reading about how an ambulance driver was shunned at a hawker store, right? And they wouldn't sell to him because they were worried that he would pass the disease. And I got really upset because I remember what it was like during SARS when our frontline health workers were the ones who were bearing the medical brunt of it, and they were being shunned as well. So I made some calls, started some things to do, and I put out a LinkedIn thing to say, look, I'm going to be buying meals just to thank our healthcare workers once a week on a Wednesday or whatever it is. If you want X dollars, we'll buy one meal. And these are from people I didn't know. Steph, what else can we do? This is a great initiative. And then other corporates said, okay, I will adopt this other hospital, you do this one. And people are just looking for things. And I think increasingly, if it is a government-sponsored program, people may not necessarily feel that they have the same autonomy, agency, and impact. So I suspect that might be part of the problem.
Yeah. So I think it goes back, Siang, to what you were saying, that we might be prepared to take in different responses and accept that it may not be so well coordinated and not so neat and tidy. And so the phrase that comes to mind is thicker skin.
Thicker skin.
Because we have to accept that, some of our efforts may fall flat or people might reject it.
It's like giving up the seat in the MRT, right? Sometimes you give up.
Yeah.
No. Now that like it's a bit embarrassed to sit down.
You ever give up your seat to me, I might
You're in
slap you
trouble,
on
right?
the side of your head. No.
See, you
Don't
see?
call me
Thicker skin,
auntie.
thicker skin.
Yeah.
Yes.
Okay, we've got a couple more questions. So the next question is your wish for citizen government partnership. What would that be? The one wish. And I will start with Steph.
Empathy.
Go around.
Conversation.
I
one
hope
wish.
that for a lot more sort of public policies that we make, we'll be able to say that we've talked to different groups and we know this policy is what people want. And then I hope we can say a lot more of that.
For me, it's like the wish is don't give up. On all sides, like don't give up. Even if you had like a rotten kind of experience, engaging, don't give up. Like the next one might be better, might be, and we're all learning lah.
Maybe now like everyone, maybe I'll say like more compassion on other people, or maybe like more graciousness. So that when someone makes a mistake, you don't like, this person no good, right? You can be more like, everyone makes mistakes. As long as the mistake isn't too disastrous, we can still work with that, you know what I mean? And to accept that like no one will ever be perfect and no system will ever be perfect. It's just like a whole bunch of things like cobbled together, designed to make it work at that point of time.
Yes.
I think many of us, like when I grew up, when I was growing up, I always thought like my parents were like, superhuman, they can do all these things. And only when I grew older, I realized, they're actually just doing what works at that moment. There's no perfect system to parent. And I think people need to realize that, but for the broader society as well. Like, whether it's government, political office holders, normal people, businesses.
Yeah. And I guess what that needs from us is just a sense of understanding that we're all just trying to figure it out together. Right?
Yeah.
The last question is going to be what your aspirations are for a better Singapore.
We talked about how we're faced with really intractable challenges going forward. Like my hope is just a Singapore where I feel like we're in it together, that we're not going to leave anyone behind, that when the going gets tough, we have each other to lean on. Because I think the going's going to get tough, and I don't want to feel alone in the challenge. For me, is this sense of togetherness, that we're in this together and we're going to overcome all odds, together. Yeah.
I would say that for the kampong spirit, it's nothing the government can do, right?
Yeah.
The kampong is sort of within us,
Yeah.
right? So I'm hoping that Singapore will be a place where we'll help each other sort of know that we belong, right? It's not my Singapore, your Singapore. Unfortunately, it's our Singapore, and if we can help each other a little bit to feel a lot more belonging, I think that's something I would hope.
I think like consensus is something that would be very difficult for everyone to reach, but I think if we can agree on some like basic founding principles of the country, that maybe some of them in the past are still relevant today, then we could kind of achieve like the togetherness and the stuff that we want to do together. But only if there's a conversation and then we agree on it. If not, like it's just like the group leader of your group project just go do something and then never credit anyone, or no one likes that.
I don't disagree with what they've said. I want a Singapore where I belong and which belongs to me as a Singapore citizen. By that second part, I mean something that we all collectively own and take responsibility for. Belonging, I guess, would be the word I would pick.
Thanks, Steph. And I think that brings us to the end of this panel. I almost feel like we should break out into a national song or something.
Do you know any national songs?
Don't bluff.